So we've talked about temporal, task and institutional boundaries. One of the other things that we want to introduce at this point is what is called the work breakdown structure. What is the best way to actually implement a project or actually translate the tasks into actionable points? One of the primary purposes of what is called as this WBS, the work breakdown structure, is to ensure that any task required to produce a deliverable is not overlooked. So tasks which are overlooked, are not accounted for, are not planned, are not budgeted, are not staffed, so the project loses. So in order to avoid this situation, you create what is called a work breakdown structure. We need to know, in order to develop this work breakdown structure, we need to know what needs to be done, by whom, by when, with what resources. Every task, however small it is, must be completed in order for the project to meet its goal. Therefore, making this list is a non-trivial activity. How do you do it? It's very difficult to explain how one does it, because there's a bit of science involved in it and there is a lot of art involved in it. Essentially, it has to be a systematic procedure. Generally, as a rule of thumb, one might say that the work breakdown structure must list looks like a tree. It has a tree structure with many levels. It is related to the task, temporal and institutional boundaries, but it is perhaps in relative terms closely related to the task boundary. So what we do is we start with a list of major tasks, major groupings of tasks, maybe 5-6 groupings of tasks, not more than that. So these would be level 1 of the work breakdown structure, and each of these is further broken down into level 2, level 3 and so on, but not too many levels. What happens is, if you have, let's say, 10 levels of work breakdown structure, it's quite easy to get lost in all those details. So again, like I said, it's not a precise science. One has to really look at the project complexity and then create work breakdown structures. One way, this is why I mentioned earlier in the session that the complexity of the project determines how the project is structured. So if the project is extremely complex, then we can break it down into sub projects, and then each sub project can have its own work breakdown structure. So we don't want to create a complex project and a complex WBS for it, which we don't understand, which we cannot read very well, which we cannot act on. So what we understand from work breakdown structure is the way is that it's a tool for arranging the tasks into an actionable order. And I look at a work breakdown structure, I know what resources are required, what is the sequence in which these are going to happen and so on. And like we just discussed, it is best to keep them into as few levels as possible. The project budgets are also in a way related to the work breakdown structures. For simple projects, we know it's quite easy to estimate the budget requirement. Let's say I just want to buy a couple of PCs and then install a off-the-shelf software into it and provide some service, then I think the costing is really not very complicated. But imagine a massive e-governance project, maybe an Aadhaar type project or a passport type project in India, or any number of e-governance projects involving the treasury or health or education sector. The budgeting for such projects is a complex exercise. We need to know what hardwares are required, what kind of networks are required, what kind of data center backup is required, what kind of applications are required, what operating system is required, what resources are required. So the budgeting process can be extremely complex. So one way we tackle this budgeting requirement is through the work breakdown structure. So I now have a visible representation of the project into smaller work units. Then for each work unit I am able to identify the resource requirements, the ICT requirements, and then I apply the costing at each of these work levels, roll it up. I might have a good estimate of what the project is going to cost. There are other ways of doing it. There are top-down approaches, there are bottom-up approaches, there are a mix of these two, but the point is work breakdown structure is a good tool for both managing the project as well as getting an idea of how the budgets evolve.